Roll. Welcome back, everyone, to the CBJ podcast. I'm Brandon. Alongside me is Jason. Unfortunately, Kim is unavailable, but that's okay. We're still here talking sports like we always do. Um, we're going to talk about what's happening with the Celtics. They've been definitely improving since last episode we had. Uh, NFL free agency has quieted down a little bit, but want to talk a little bit more. And then NBA, we got some news, and we'll end with some sports headlines. Um, with that, we'll jump right into our first segment, talking Celtics. Jason, uh, how have the Celtics done this past week and the month of April, and how did they turn around since the little stint after the All-Star break?
I think it's been pretty good what we've seen this past week and past the All Star break. They struggled in the first few weeks after the All Star break, and there was a time where they were well below 500. But I'm happy where they are right now. They're making a good comeback in the standings. 4 wins in this past week against Denver, Portland, the Lakers, and then they come back home for the Warriors. And before that, the 3-game road trip versus Denver, Portland, and the Lakers, they had a 7-game homestand, which I thought they would capitalize on, maybe win 5, 6 games. They won 4, which is fine. It's just barely above average, which you have to take advantage of that home crowd because that home stretch was the first stretch in which the fans were back. And the Celtics historically have always thrived off of fans, and we've seen it for years and years now. And I wish they took a little more advantage, but coming into other teams' arenas and smoking them and also making some big clutch plays is something that you have to be very happy about. The Celtics, it shows that they can be the road team like in a playoff series and pull out with a win or two in each of those stands. So I'm pretty happy with the direction this team is in. They're on a 6-game win streak um, after probably the game of the year last night, maybe even overall in the NBA for sure for the Celtics. And I'm happy with how Jason Tatum's developing into a superstar right before our very eyes. Jaylen Brown is elite on both sides of the ball. Kemba is looking like his former self. Uh, Smart's looking like, of course, a top 10 premier defender in the league, as always. And the role players looking good. I think Robert Williams established himself that he can be the future center for many, many years. But the Celtics, they're still one step away from being a championship contender. I think that they can definitely force the team in the second round to 6, 7 games, but I just don't see them making that next step to get to the conference finals and play a team that's elite like the Brooklyn Nets. Even without LaMarcus Aldridge, who just retired, uh, that is a scary team with KD, Kyrie, Harden. Probably the scariest team I've seen in a while, maybe minus the Warriors back in 2017 and 2018. Uh, but I'm just not really I'm not satisfied right now because I know the schedule is gonna get harder. They've played teams that have been very shorthanded. Um, they beat a Lakers team without LeBron and Anthony Davis. They beat a Nuggets team without Jamal Murray. They beat a Warriors team without Clay, Oubre, and Wiseman. They beat the Blazers, who had a few guys out. So I don't know if I'm completely satisfied. I think they need to prove it that they can pull out some big wins, and they have a tough schedule coming up in the week ahead, featuring some games against the Suns and the Nets. So I'm happy with the direction this team is in, but I'm just not satisfied, and I'm not buying this team getting to the conference finals and further.
Yeah, I think one of the points Jason meant was talked about in that 6-game win streak was a lot of these teams been shorthanded, and also the Celtics have been shorthanded. We haven't seen newly signed Evan Fournier, who's been on COVID protocol. Robert Williams has been on uh, day-to-day injury report, and last night we were out with Jaylen Brown. So talking about all these other teams without we're shorthanded, we are also shorthanded. Um, and but when you play these teams and only win by a few points against shorthanded teams, it goes to show, can you really uh, play well against the top tier teams like Philadelphia, Brooklyn, Phoenix. Like Jason mentioned, we got Brooklyn and Phoenix coming up, and I don't know if we can win that if especially if all these teams having good players. So I think Celtics have been performing well. They are 8-1 in the month of April. The only loss at home against Philly, who is in first in the East. But I would say, other than their one loss, they've been pretty good in the 6-game win streak, and right now are in fourth in the standings. And I think they just got to keep it here. They need to avoid the play-in round as much as possible. The 4, 5, 6 seed. 6 is the lowest we can get. As a Celtics fan, you don't want to see them in the play-in round because it's just going to be a much harder and difficult journey to the NBA championship. And like Jason mentioned, I don't think we are at championship level, so playing that play-in round could definitely make it even harder.
Yeah, the play-in tournament is a new addition this year to a full season. We saw it kind of in there last year between the 8 and the 9 seed. Uh, if there was a tiebreaker, which only happened in the Western Conference between the Grizzlies and the Blazers. But this year it's in both conferences and it's part of the playoff bracket and it could be there for the next few years because they're still trying to find a way to get back to the 82 game schedule pretty soon. So they might have to do this to determine some playoff spots because this is 10 less games. It's a 72 game season, as we know. And as a Celtics fan, I would love to avoid that play-in tournament because yes, the Celtics are record-wise better than all those teams because I can't see them falling lower than the 7 seed. 7 seed is where I think that's the lowest they'll go. I think they can get up to the 4 seed and stay there. I think they'll be somewhere between the 4 and 7 seed. But if they're the 7 seed, we have to play a team like the Wizards, the Pacers, the Bulls, or like the Hornets, someone like that. I'd be kind of scared to face some of those teams. Yes, they only need one win if they're the 7 or 8 seed, but those teams have looked pretty good. And if a team like the Hornets, if they can get healthy and get Hayward and LaMelo back, that's a really scary team in my opinion. They're a young team that it has a lot of energy. They have some guys that know the Celtics playbook, like Hayward and Rozier. So I'd love to avoid that play-in tournament because I have a feeling that if they do, they'd play a really tough team. Even like the Wizards with Westbrook on the triple-double tear. He is 10 triple-doubles away from tying Oscar Robertson's record for the most triple-doubles in NBA history. And he's already the Wizards franchise history triple-double leader in not even one season. And I do not want to face that or the league's leading scorer. I don't know if Steph Curry might have broken that with Bradley Beal. Those two are going head to head for that scoring title. But I'm happy with the Celtics overall. I'm just hoping they can maintain a 4 seed and avoid teams in the first round like the Nets, Bucks, Sixers, and Heat. I'm hoping they can play someone else because it gives them the opportunity to find their identity early on and get out in like 4, 5, 6 games, which I'd be happy about. And maybe they could pull off an upset on a team like the Sixers or the Bucks. So they cannot they cannot slow down. They have to keep playing at this elite level. Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown have to be on tears like they are if this team really wants to make a big shot at making a long playoff run because the expectations are not too high right now as Celtics fans, as we've been below 500 many times this year. But I think the schedule that they have left, it's a great opportunity to show that they can be an elite team. They have a lot of games against the Heat coming up. They like 2 back-to-back in beginning of May. You have a Suns game, a Nets game, a lot of Bulls games out there, a Knicks game at the end of the year, which will be crucial for playoff seeding. So they just got to hold on. Maintain this rhythm and keep pulling out some wins and take advantage of those shorthanded teams. Anything else to add, Brandon?
Yeah, I think one of the important parts about that play-in tournament, we're talking about the teams who win advance. So 7 and 8, they just have to win one. The 9, 10, they have to win two. So we'll only know 1 through 6 before the play-in tournament starts. So 1 through 6 has definite clinched playoffs. 7 through 10 could be anyone's game. The only thing that's interesting about the 7 through the 7 through 10 is whoever those two teams that lose both of their games. So we could see either a 7 or 8 or a 9 and 10. They are actually in one of the teams dealing with the lotteries for next year. So you could have a team who is the 8th seed playing for that play-in tournament to make the playoffs, but also if they lose 2 games, they're could be one of the top teams for a lottery. So it goes really interesting because you could see a really good team, basically like a 500 team, getting a top spot in the lottery. As we know, the lottery is basically random in the NBA. It's not like the NBA, NFL, where your worst record, you're automatically assigned to number one. So that is definitely a new factor, letting those teams be in position for not only a playoff spot, but they lose a lottery spot in next year.
Yeah, I think the lottery spot will play a big factor in how teams approach the playing games. Because I mean, yes, you don't want to tank in a playoff game. You of course want to play your heart out and get the win and advance to the playoffs because that's what all teams want to do. But if you feel that your team is not in position to take on a team, because you're gonna have to play a top 1 or 2 seed, no matter who makes it. So if your team feels like, I don't know if I can even get a game on those guys, I mean, you could probably tank and like just get a draft pick, get the 13th or 14th pick instead of just getting whooped by the Nets or the Sixers. Uh, and I'd rather for if it was the Celtics, I'd rather just go to the playoffs and like lose in 4 games to the Nets, because first off, we want to be as competitive as possible, and second off, the Celtics they are not good with drafting around the 13th and 14th pick. They drafted Romeo Langford and Aaron Nesmith, who are good players, but there have been better options after that. So with that, the Celtics they're heading in a good direction. And the play-in tournament is going to be a big factor, but we are going to move on to our next segment with the NFL. So the last time we talked about the free agency moves, we just focused on the Patriots, but now we're going to talk about some of the biggest league-wide moves. This is not all of them. It may seem like a lot, but there have been hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of signings. We're not getting through all of them. Um, but here are a few of the most, not few, probably like close to 30 of the most notable ones. We look at the quarterbacks. We saw Ryan Fitzpatrick go to the Washington football team, Andy Dalton to the Chicago Bears, Tyrod Taylor to the Texans. Running backs are a few signings. Aaron Jones re-signs with the Packers, Leonard Fournette to the Bucks. Also, Chris Carson, he re-signed with the Seahawks. Kenyon Drake surprisingly goes to the Raiders, and he was actually replaced there by James Conner. He's going to the Cardinals. Receivers, we had Kenny Galladay go to the Giants. Juju stay with the Steelers. AJ Green go to the Cardinals. Will Fuller going down to Miami. Marvin Jones in Jacksonville. Sammy Watkins with the Ravens. Emmanuel Sanders with the Bills. Corey Davis with the Jets. A lot of other good moves there in tight ends. Of course, Gronk stay in Tampa, getting a new deal there. And we got the offensive lineman, a lot of big deals. We have Joe Tooney to the Chiefs. Trent Williams signed a massive deal with the 49ers, locks him up for like 6 years or something like that. And Corey Linsley, former center of the Packers, he went to the Chargers, making him the highest paid center in the National Football League. Trey Hendrickson, he was very underrated last year. He was among the top players in total sacks last year. He's headed to Cincy after a year on the Saints. Yannick Ngakwe, he's been bouncing around between teams and teams. He's now in Vegas after playing with Baltimore at the end of last season. Hassan Reddick, he was someone who had like 5 sacks in one game with the Cardinals. He's going to the Panthers. Bud Dupree from Pittsburgh, he's headed to Tennessee. Jadeveon Clowney, a former #1 overall pick, is going to the Cleveland Browns. Patrick Peterson to the Vikings. Shaquille Griffin to the Jags. Kyle Fuller to the Broncos. And Keanu Neal to the Cowboys. So those are a lot of big, big, big signings. Teams should be happy that they've reeled in some good players. I don't think any team compares to the Patriots. Maybe the Bucks, because the Bucks, fun fact, they did bring back 22 of their starters for this season. So they're gonna have the exact same starting lineup heading into 2021. the Patriots, they're recruiting guys like crazy. Judon, Henry, Jonnu, the list goes on and on. Those are probably the top two teams in free agency. But these signings look really good. So we're gonna go through each of our favorite signings, least favorite signings, and underrated signings. So I'm gonna start with my favorite signing. I went with Curtis Samuel going to the Washington football team. I think this is a very, very big move. It also falls into kind of underrated, but it is my favorite because Curtis Samuel actually was teammates with Terry McLaurin at Ohio State. They lived in the same dorm and everything, so they have great chemistry. I think they're going to work really well. Ryan Fitzpatrick and Curtis Samuel, he is he acts as a wide receiver, but he can take some run plays. And the Washington football team, they love their run plays. They have Antonio Gibson, J.D. McKissick, and a lot of other fun running backs. And you can see Curtis Samuel run some jet sweeps or wide receiver end arounds, or he could play in the backfield a bit. And I think Curtis Samuel is going to be a big addition to the Washington football team, and a team that I think they've improved since this last offseason. They were the one NFC East team to make the postseason. So Curtis Samuel is a huge upgrade, and he and Terry McLaurin will form a great duo, and good to see the Ryan Fitzpatrick versus Taylor Heineke in training camp to see who gets that starting spot. I'm going to my least favorite signing, Kenny Galladay to the Giants. I think the signing is so overhyped. I mean, I like Galladay. I think he's pretty good, but statistically, he has not been great, and he was very overpaid. I'm sure Giants fans are happy. I think the Giants are a good spot for him. He'll be alongside Darius Slayton and some other good weapons there. But Kenny Galladay got overpaid. It's an average of 18 million a year. After barely even playing a season, he ended the year with a season-ending injury. So I'm not really satisfied on Kenny Galladay. I think he was overvalued. I think yes, that's a good fit on the Giants, but he could have gone to a team um, that is a good wide receiver away from being a big threat in their conference. But I think Galladay in New York is fine. I just don't really like it. I think it could have gone to another team for less money if the GMs played it out right. And underrated, I went with Hassan Reddick going to the Panthers. Like I mentioned, he had a record-breaking sack game earlier in the year. He was among the top in the league in sacks, and he didn't get paid too much. The Panthers, they honestly got a steal with recruiting Reddick to their team, and he'll be a big addition on a Panthers team that it has a young defense. They'll join guys like Jeremy Chin there, who had a great rookie year. They're transitioning into a new era without Luke Kuechly and Thomas Davis in their linebacking core. So Hassan Reddick can take that spot. And the Panthers are a great young team, and I'm excited to see what they can do. Brennan, who are your picks?
Yeah, I think before I go into my picks, I first want to say like we've seen a lot of crazy moves this free agency, and not just talking about the quarterback situation. I'm just talking about in general, and this has probably been one of the most craziest free agencies, and it feels like um, since the first day that free agency began, seems like every day we see a new player signing up a new team. So definitely crazy how much change, how many players are changing teams. But I think part of that has to do with the cap, and it was the lowest it's ever been in a long time. So all these teams had to make decisions if they wanted to keep these players or have smaller contracts so they could make sure they could stay in the cap. Um, my favorite, I think I'm also gonna have to um, agree with Jason and saying Curtis Samuel Ryan Fitzpatrick duo. And I'm making this a duo because I think Ryan Fitzpatrick and Curtis Samuel in Washington, they're going to be a great duo. Samuel, not only can he run, but he can also catch as a wide receiver. And uh, Fitzpatrick will always pull some magic out of his hat and make something crazy. And we saw that Washington defense was decent. I think they brought back a lot of those guys. Uh, um, Antonio Gibson is back for the running game. And I think adding Fitzpatrick, a good QB who can mentor Heineke, and player like Curtis Samuel, I think Washington's going to be a great team. Curtis Samuel was one of my players that I wanted the Pats to go after, as well as Yannick Nagaku, who signed with the Raiders. He would have been a great addition to the Patriots, but unfortunately, he signed with the Raiders. My least favorite signing, I don't know if I have a least favorite signing. I think probably the one that means the least is, or I can say interesting, is Emmanuel Sanders signed with the Buffalo Bills. I think that was really interesting. They brought um, the guy from the wide receiver from Minnesota, who was great last year. I'm forgetting his name,
On great, yeah.
and I think bringing in Emmanuel Sanders, it's just going to be that Buffalo team is just even more scary. So um, I think that's more of a surprise pick than a least favorite pick.
There's some good picks there. I want to touch on a bit about the Bills getting Sanders, like you mentioned. I that's one of my favorite signings because the Bills have a very, very good receiving core. Stephon Diggs, who led the league in receptions last year, he had a record-breaking year. You see how hard he works in the locker room. He and Josh Allen have been best buddies ever since that trade went down early in last offseason in 2020. They actually met through playing video games together. That's how they got their chemistry up. They were playing Madden, and they were like throwing to each other in the video game, and it just shows how seriously these players take these connections. And we saw Josh Allen develop into arguably a top five quarterback and an MVP candidate last year, a team that pushed the Chiefs to an AFC championship. They were very, very close. And you saw Stephon Diggs, he was on the field after the game, watching the ceremony, and you know he's coming back more motivated. And you got Emmanuel Sanders to that receiving core. You got Isaiah McKenzie, who is very great all around returner. He can run the ball. He can catch the ball. He's like Curtis. He's not as good as Curtis Samuel, but he plays a little bit on the special teams and can provide like a little bit of that role. And also Cole Beasley, he's a great slot receiver, so underrated. He was an All-Pro second team last year, which to me, I think that's a bit of overrating. But overall, Cole Beasley has been underrated his entire career, whether it be with Dallas or the Bills. And the Bills are going to be a great team with Josh Allen. Hopefully, maintain that MVP form like we saw last year. He is going to be rocketing passes and adding Emmanuel Sanders, who has had a good career. He's been bouncing around from team to team after he started your career with the Steelers and the Broncos for a while. Then he finished that 2019 year with a Super Bowl team that lost in the Super Bowl to the Chiefs with the 49ers, then the Saints last year, now the Bills. So he wants to bounce around between contenders, and I think he has a good shot with a fun young team like Buffalo. Um, with that, we're going to Julian Edelman's retirement. As Pats fans, it's very sad to see a legend hang it up, but we have to be happy that it's best for him. Uh, and it's definitely it's hard to handle, but I support Julian Edelman in his decision. He will always be a Pats legend, and I'm pretty happy with what happened. So, do we see this as an end of an era in New England? Because I mean, if we think about it, the last three Patriots Super Bowls, Julian Edelman has been a major, major factor in all three of them. We saw him get that go-ahead touchdown against the Seahawks. We saw him make what we know as the catch in against the Falcons, and then against the Rams, he had one of the greatest wide receiver performances of all time in a Super Bowl. He won Super Bowl MVP with like 150 plus receiving yards, and it was just historic for him in a low-scoring game that wasn't that entertaining. Julian Edelman made those entertaining catches, and he was a major factor in why Sony Michel scored that game that go ahead touchdown as a rookie in that Super Bowl. And Edelman was setting up field position like crazy. So was Gronk. But I think Edelman was a huge factor. So Brandon, do you see this as an end of an era? As you know, a lot of players are leaving from that era with Brady, Gronk, Edelman, Patrick Chung retiring. Maybe we could see Hightower leave soon, and while the O line's been a little messed up. So what do you think about this?
I actually don't think this is an end of the era. I think we saw in 2020, it was kind of an in between year. It was a very weird year. We saw the Patriots lose the most amount of players due to COVID opt outs. And I think after what we've seen from Bill in free agency, the message was very clear around the Patriots front office. And the message was New England isn't a team that loses a lot of games. Hasn't doesn't have bad seasons, multiple seasons, bad season. This is a team that needs to win, and it doesn't mean win championships, but it needs to be a good team. And Bill, I think he's made some mistakes as GM in some of the draft picks. Like we know, picking kicker Justin Rohrwasser was probably one of the weirdest picks he's ever made, but I think he's definitely done a good job this offseason. And maybe it is an era, end of an era, but I think we got a new era starting with some great players. And I think the Patriots are back.
Well, yeah, I think it's an end of an era in terms of the players that are there. Like I mentioned, Brady, Gronk, and Edelman are of course gone, and they have been probably the three staple pieces to the last three Super Bowls. And the 2010s decade, they're the three most important players to the team, I'd say. You could argue
I
maybe
would
the
also like to add that one of the key players in the playoffs during Super Bowl 51 against Atlanta and previous Super Bowls was running back James White. And we saw the Patriots brought him back this year. Um, and that he was a great player in one of the Super Bowls. And I think a lot of people think, oh, Brady, Gronk, Edelman, they were the star, but James White really helped in that running game, and definitely haven't lost everyone. Just because the big three is gone, I don't think you can say that era is gone.
Yeah, that's a fair point there because they do have a lot of guys from that 2010s era. Like I mentioned, Devin McCourty is still on the team. James White, like you mentioned, who, in my opinion, should have been that Super Bowl 51 MVP with three touchdowns, a go-ahead winning touchdown in overtime, and a two-point conversion. And he also broke running back receiving records for Super Bowl, like in Super Bowl history, which just goes to show how good he is. And he even shut out a lot, getting a touchdown, I think, against the Eagles in that shootout game in Super Bowl 52. And I think they do keep some guys. You got Devin McCourty, Dante Hightower, James White. There's still a lot of other guys. Matthew Slater on special teams. They are sort of they're big pieces to what we can call that 2010 to 2020 era for the Patriots. I mean, the Brady era lasts from 2000 to 2020, but I personally say that there's two parts to that era. One would be in the 2000s, and the other would be in the 2010s. And there were three Super Bowls, won in both of them. So yes, it's different because when you think of the Patriots from the last decade, the three first names that come to mind have to be Brady, Gronk, and Edelman. But you still have Bill Belichick there, and Bill Belichick has been the coach for all six of those Super Bowls. So you can't say it's the end of a coaching era. But player wise, the Patriots are very, very they're looking very good going into next season. Um, yes, Edelman's a loss, but their receiving core, they're transitioning into some new guys. We saw Aguilar and Bourne getting brought in. Jacoby Myers looked like a star last year despite not scoring any touchdowns. And N'Keal Harry, we're still waiting for that breakout year. If he can prove why the Patriots took him over DK and AJ Brown, um, we'll see. I doubt that would happen, but if he can provide like 400, 500 yards as a fourth receiving option, that's enough in my opinion. Even though he'll always be looked at as a draft bust, but just provide something of what his old value was supposed to be. I'd be pretty happy with that. And the Patriots are just great looking forward. But going back to Edelman, it seems as if the injuries were some of the major reasons of retirement. Brand, you can chime in if you think differently.
I mean, I think everyone. It seems like everyone thinks that injuries wasn't, and um, injuries may be a reason why he doesn't make it to Canton, but I don't see why there's any doubt that he doesn't make the Patriots Hall of Fame. I think um, because of his injuries, he had injuries at the beginning of his career and at the end of his career. Yes, he made the catch. He was Super Bowl MVP, but I'm not sure if he is a player that's going to be making it to Canton. Moving on, we're gonna quickly talk about the NBA trades a little bit more. One of the biggest trades that we didn't get to talk about last week was the Trailblazers and Raptors making a trade. So the Blazers received Norman Powell, and the Raptors received Gary Trent Jr. and Rodney Hood. Jason, what's your thoughts on this trade, and who won this trade?
This was a very controversial trade when you look at both sides. I think both sides both benefit from this trade because Norman Powell, before this trade, he was averaging 20 points per game as like the fourth or fifth option. And that's breaking records when you talk about it. And the Raptors team, they weren't even that good. Like you saw Siakam was averaging over 20, you saw Van Vliet 20. You probably want the ball in the hands of Kyle Lowry ahead of Norman Powell. OG Anunoby was dropping 15. Chris Boucher was looking like a beast. But then I was a bit surprised that Toronto wanted to let him go, but I'm happy with what they got back. Yes, Rodney Hood is not going to be there for a while. I think he's just a 1 year rental and see if he can help get some bench production on a team that could possibly. They're only like a game and a half or half a game out of that play-in tournament, so he could provide something. But Gary Trent Jr., wow, he is great for them and I think he's a future star. He might even be one already. We saw about a week ago, he shot 17 for 19 from the field, which is well above 85% from the field, which is like record breaking in my opinion. And he dropped like over 40 points in that game, and he's still staying pretty consistent. But for the Blazers, Norman Powell has been one of the most underrated players the past few years. He's without doubt a star, and putting him alongside a team in a wide open Western Conference because we don't really know what LeBron and Anthony Davis will be like when they come back from injuries. I'm sure LeBron will return to form, but Anthony Davis this year he was averaging only 22 points when healthy. He has not looked at his former self, and you put an injury on that. I'd be scared if I was the Lakers because there are a lot of other teams that are fighting them, like the Suns, Nuggets, Jazz, Clippers, Nuggets, and now Portland. Adding Norman Powell alongside Dame, CJ, Nurkic, Cantor, all those guys, and Carmelo Anthony, of course, on that team. Norman Powell, he is going to provide a lot of efficient shooting. He's like the most efficient shooter in the league this year. You're shooting like what 45+% from three at one point, like 55+% from the field. It's gone down obviously because you can't maintain that efficiency throughout the entire year, but he is a stud, and both sides are going to benefit from this trade. If I had to pick one winner, um, it's very very tight. I think many could disagree. I'm taking Portland as my winner because Norman Powell it shows that they want to contend with this move because Norman Powell right now is a little bit better than Gary Trent. Um, but for the future, I'm liking Toronto's future getting Gary Trent alongside guys like Siakam and Van Vliet for the next upcoming years. And I think he'll develop into a good star around those guys. And we can see the Raptors actually make a good comeback because Kyle Lowry, we thought he'd get traded at the deadline. We thought maybe he'd go to a team that's contending, like maybe Portland wanted an offer for him. Probably not, since they have Dame, but maybe like a backup point guard role. And there's also rumors that DeMar DeRozan might want to come back to Toronto, and if they keep Kyle Lowry and a team with Lowry, Van Vliet, Trent, DeRozan, Siakam, and a lot of other good players, that's a pretty good team, and I'd be happy if that could happen. So Portland is my winner for right now, but Toronto has a great future.
Yeah, I think this was probably one of the biggest trades with the Blazers receiving Norman Powell, but Gary Trent Jr. big loss as he will definitely help the Toronto Raptors. They can hopefully he can help them move up in the standings. I'm gonna quickly mention the other couple trades as we're running out of time. Clippers and Hawks made a trade with Clippers receiving Rajon Rondo and the Hawks receiving Lou Williams and two future second round picks. And I think uh, the Clippers getting Rondo is a loss to Lou Williams. Yes, Rondo is good point guard, but they already have Paul George, and I think Lou Williams is a loss. You agree, Jason?
I do think it's a loss. Lou Williams right now is the better player than Rajon Rondo, and some people forget about this trade, but the Hawks are actually kind of a contending team, not contending, but like they are in the playoff position right now. They had the 4 seed in their arms before the Celtics beat the Warriors last night, so we can see that the Hawks, they're a good team, and if you have Lou Williams to that bench, who is one of the greatest 6 men in NBA history, I think they should name the award after him because of what he's done. Um, and he also contemplated retirement after finding out he was traded. He was heartbroken that the Clippers were going to give him up. He's been on the Clippers for a while. He was part of that major Chris Paul trade that sent Chris Paul to Houston back in 2017. And Lou Williams has shown that he can be the best 6 man in basketball for many, many years. It's a loss for them, but getting 2 second-round picks and Lou Williams, it's very underrated. But the reason why I like this trade for the Clippers more, um, even though they get the least value, is because they need a point guard for Kawhi Leonard. Kawhi Leonard is without a doubt a superstar, arguably a top 5 player. You have Paul George, arguably a top 15 player. And Kawhi Leonard has complained that he wants a true point guard around him. They have some good point guards on roster, like Patrick Beverly, who is a defensive threat. He's a monster on defense. He can lock up anyone. But I see him more of as a 2 guard. And same thing with Reggie Jackson, who is a bucket getter, but he's more of an off guard, a facilitator. And Rajon Rondo is the definition of a true point guard, in my opinion, if it's not Chris Paul, because Rajon Rondo, throughout his career, has shown that he can score the ball. He's crafty with the ball. He can rebound. He's might be one of the greatest passers of all time. And what he's done in his career, he can average double-digit assists on a Celtics team with Pierce, KG, and Ray Allen. So I'm loving this trade for the Clippers. Rajon Rondo is a true point guard, and I think it's only uphill for the Clippers. And I think they're going to push a team like the Lakers to 7 games. And if Anthony Davis isn't healthy, I think the Clippers could maybe sneak into that finals.
Yeah, that West is definitely going to be very interesting as it comes down to why we're less than 1 month away from the end of regulation. Uh, Mavs and Pelicans, JJ Redick and Nicolo Melli going to the Mavs, and the Pelicans receiving James Johnson, Wes Iwundu, and a 2021 second-round pick. And I think as a Pelicans fan, it's definitely a loss for them. I think JJ Redick was good, and as a Celtics fan, he was one of the players that could have come to Boston. So I think there's definitely been questions about did Danny Ainge get the right guys, but sometimes when you don't want big guys, they come with a big price. um, Anything you want to add, Jason, or no?
Yeah, I want to touch on that trade just a bit. The Mavericks getting JJ Redick, I love that move right there because they add more sharpshooting to a team that struggled from 3 this year. Um, I mean, Luka started the year struggling from 3. He was personally my MVP pick going into the year. He started averaging like 31% from 3, but Luka Doncic is going way, way uphill. And having a veteran presence like JJ Redick on a team that is very young with a star duo of Luka and Porzingis and some other fun young players, I think it's very beneficial for them to have a veteran 3-point shooter who is a specialist from the 3-point line. He is one of the greatest 3-point shooters of all time. In my opinion, I think he should be top 20 in that conversation. And he's just going to be so helpful for that team, that Mavs young team. And I'm very excited to see where that team can go.
Yeah, Dallas is definitely a great team of Luka Doncic. All right, we got some sports headlines. In the NCAA championship, we have Baylor beating Gonzaga 86-70. Baylor won their first championship, and Gonzaga did not be undefeated. It's just like the Patriots in one of the Super Bowls when they were undefeated into the Super Bowl. In golf, Japanese golfer Hideki Matsuyama won the Masters with a score of 10 under par. He's the first Japanese player to ever win the Masters. In baseball news, the Red Sox started slow, losing their opening series to the Baltimore Orioles. After that, they went on a 9-0 run, and that win streak has ended, but they're back on winning terms with last night's win. They play a doubleheader today, and then tomorrow, Patriots say they'll play fourth game of the series against the White Sox. Denver Nuggets star Jamal Murray has a torn ACL. He'll miss the remainder of the 2021 season. Warriors rookie center James Wiseman will be out for the year as well. He was the number 2 overall pick this year. NFL draft coming up. It's April 29th, Thursday, April 29th to Sunday, May 1st. The New England Patriots' first pick is the number 15. We are still waiting to see if they will trade up for a QB in round 1 or save it for round 2. In hockey, UMass Amherst won the NCAA Hockey National Championship. And in NBA news, we heard LaMarcus Aldridge retire. Lastly, MLS season kicked off this weekend. The Revs played their opening match against Chicago Fire in a 2-2 draw. Adam Buxa and Gustavo Bo with the goals. That's it for this week's headlines. These headlines are presented by Anchor. Anchor FM is the easiest way to create your own podcast. With that, we're going to end this episode. Thank you guys for watching. Don't forget to follow us on Instagram to follow along any news and any other sports updates that are happening. Jason, anything you want to add?
Not much. A lot of stuff going on. NBA and NHL, we're fighting to see those playoff spots. The NFL draft, bit of a sneak peek to what we're doing. So we brought that up in the headlines. We're talking NFL draft mainly next episode next week, so I'm very excited about that.
That's right. Next week, we'll be talking about NFL draft. What's going on with Cam Newton, and are the Patriots going to get Jimmy G? All that and more on next week's episode. Stay tuned and keep your post notifications on YouTube so you will never miss another episode of the podcast. With that, we thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time.